So it's 7:16. It sounds like they're going to be out of session soon. For those listening, in a couple of days, we've been waiting for the Dummerston School Board to discuss Act 46 school board representation. And it sounds like they're going to be finishing soon and joining us. We just started. We're starting an hour and 15 minutes late. We have a packed agenda, guys. Jill is taking minutes for us. I would recommend that since we have so much to do that we go, let's assume that they are gonna come in a few minutes and then we go a little late. Does that work for everyone? Okay, so I'm gonna ask everyone, does everyone have, there are two documents in front of you. There's a working draft of a schedule, so if we were to move forward with unification consideration by the voters, this is the schedule we would follow, but I don't want to go into that in depth. I just whipped this up because I had a conversation with Chris Leopold today. This will change after tonight's meeting, so I will send it out again. We can't approve minutes. We can't talk about what the meeting is about yet because we don't know how much time we're going to have. What I think perhaps we could talk about, guys, is public information. We have to do a lot of that, which we have not yet done because we've been created a report. And so there's been some hesitation to present something to the voters when it's not really clear what we would be presenting. So what this would be is forums. Forums in every town by this study committee. So we would do that, and I'd like to also, again, if we're going to move forward on this consideration, or at least the process of this consideration, we also really need to get this website, which we've been talking about for some time. So do we want to spend a few minutes talking about what that could be? You're welcome. Can we spend just a few minutes? So Frank, maybe we could start with you telling us what the central office could offer us for that. I mean, should it be a blog link off the website, or what should it be?
I would think that's the way to go. Have we started? Didn't we start down that path?
I can't really hear you.
Wasn't there a group that started a web repository of documents?
Amy has some.
Amy has some.
Initially, Amy's been the keeper of documents.
Okay.
I started to take notes, but we only have like 4 sentences. Okay. So maybe we want to wait and have them come in and we'll officially start.
Well, we have officially started, but who are we waiting for? We're waiting for Dummerston. We will be reporting.
Well, one of them's here. So.
And are you the voting member?
In my mind, I am.
Okay.
There's a sign-in.
Well, in our minds, it hurts you.
All right. Thank you.
My board tabled the decision, so it's
Okay.
That's from Ms. Frank.
So is Christina and her Dan both coming in?
I don't know.
So we're just waiting for, are we just waiting for Ron?
Yes.
Okay. So we could, let's get going. So guys, Amy has passed around, Amy just put out a piece of paper, which please sign in your name and the town you're from. Thank you. So Jill, at some point you're going to transfer Amy, Jill has been taking minutes for the first few minutes.
Okay.
You're going to take over right now?
Yep.
Okay. So we're just waiting for Ron. So we had about 5 hours worth of agenda items for tonight, and we only have about an hour and a half. We might go. Right. So we normally would stop at 8. We're going to go a little long tonight, Amy. Can we go ahead and approve the minutes? Can I have a motion for those?
So
I know
moved.
there's some changes.
Yes.
Sorry?
Moved and second.
Which ones?
Name one, two.
No, I mean which minutes?
Whatever you
Both
say.
of them. Both minutes. I got him. So there's a second from Kim. There must be some discussion. Any discussion? No? Any discussion? Okay, for both minutes, no discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, they stand. Thank you, Amy, for doing the minutes. All right, so as you'll see, we have a lot of stuff to go through. We had a great meeting with Rebecca Holcomb, and we learned a lot, and we heard a lot from the board, which was great. I think based on her conversation with us and what we learned, we can make decisions about how we want to move forward at this stage, and we can get into that later. But let's go ahead and hear from the public right now. Usually, folks, 3 to 5 minutes. If you don't want to speak that long, that's fine. But we're going to just take this section of the meeting to do that. So, are you interested in speaking, or?
I'd like to reserve the opportunity to speak until I hear from some other members.
Okay, so we'll circle back to you if necessary. Anyone over here? No? Okay. Would you like to speak now?
I would like to speak. My name is Michael McGillian. I'm a resident of the town of Dummerston. I also happen to be a lawyer by trade and practice municipal law from a firm in Brattleboro. And I'm rather disturbed by the way that the study committee has approached the town of Dummerston's school board in requesting an active reconsideration of a vote of that school board previously. Now, I know we started late tonight, and that was because the school board spent a lot of time hashing out in discussion amongst themselves the input from the public on that issue, and there was not a resolution reached. But there was also a lot of discussion in that meeting that talked about process and
Talked about what?
talked about process. And as a Dummerston resident who has some fealty to the Dummerston School Board as the representative of this town, I am rather disturbed by the process that seems to have been imposed on the Dummerston School Board by the members of this study committee in seeking for a reconsideration of what was a vote of that school board. I find the legal advice that you've received to be somewhat questionable. I'm not an attorney giving you legal advice now at this meeting, but I do understand that you are working with an attorney who has helped draft the articles of proposed incorporation for this board. You're working with an attorney who helped draft Act 46 when she was legislative counsel to the Vermont legislature. You're working with an attorney who has represented the interests of the School Board Association, which is a lobbying group that's based out of Montpelier, and you're representing, you've asked for a legal opinion from another attorney from that same board. So to the extent that you're hearing things from an echo chamber that's giving you perhaps advice that this is a sovereign board, I personally would disagree with that legal interpretation, but this is what lawyers do. We argue about things. And frankly, I think we have a colorable argument, or I could make a colorable argument fairly quickly, that this is a subcommittee of all the town boards. And that if it's not a subcommittee of all the town boards, I don't see how the legislature has vested the authority in this committee to be an independent entity. So from the Dummerston perspective, from my perspective, as a parent and as a practicing municipal attorney, I want to encourage this committee to really study the various options that are presented to it, to respect the decisions of the school board until there is or is not another one. And so that's what I would like to say with my time. Thank you.
Just to clarify, we didn't ask the Dummerston School Board to reconsider their decision. We asked them to review the process of the study committee that's been written up for us in statute. So thank you. Let's go ahead and get going. Does everyone who recently came into the room have a copy of the draft that was passed out, plus a copy of, not you guys.
I do not.
Let's see, there might be an extra one over there.
You can sit here if you want.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I will wait.
Okay.
Okay.
Dan, your name tag, Dan, name tag is
You're at the
on
table
that
right
side.
On that. Just so you.
Oh, you did, okay. But you may have said that in the meeting, but I didn't say it here.
Yeah.
That was from.
All right, guys. So we met with Rebecca Holcomb. She encouraged us to keep moving forward, and what I heard of it is she was encouraging us to put it forward for consideration of the voters. If we are to do that, we have a schedule to follow. We're still fine on the calendar, but we do need to keep chugging ahead. I think at the end of this meeting, we can sort of get a consensus of how whether we're ready to do that, or whether we want more consideration, or we want to veer off, or how we want to move forward. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, so let's go ahead and start on the list. And actually, did we put this in order? I don't know.
I think so.
So since we're a little tight on time, guys, chances are good I'll probably start leaping in on some information because we've been talking with Chris Leopold quite a bit. Why don't we start? We're going to look at the report right now. The current name of this union is currently Wyndham Southeast School District. We should at some point consider, if we were to move forward, whether we want to keep that name or choose another one. There have been several suggestions: River Valley, Black Mountain. I'm just throwing that out there. It would also be good, I think, to have a vision statement or a sentence that states our vision: excellence in public education, together, walking hand in hand together forward. Something like that, which really addresses what we're working on. Reminding us that it's all about the kids and the education of the kids. Refocus us. Board voting representation. I can't recall if we talked about this in depth at the last meeting. I do know that I was supposed to go talk to Chris Leopold, and I did that with Ron, I think, was in that conversation. So what page is that?
Page 8.
So right now, we're looking at a unified school district. We're considering a board that has 8 members, 2 who live in Brattleboro, 1 who lives in each of the other towns, and then 2 at large. The 2 at large members could live in any town. All of these folks in this version, this is a hybrid model, would be voted on by the entire electorate, so all 5 towns. Okay? So go ahead, Ian.
Which means basically Brattleboro chooses all of them, even the ones that are in the other towns.
I don't know about that. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, but they would have to be a resident of the other towns, right? Do you guys want to talk about this, or yeah?
Well, I know when we were discussing it at our board, and one of our other board members brought up, he didn't feel comfortable with the 8, just in terms of ties, and he thought that 9 was a good number, and having 3 at large. That way, because a tie vote is a no vote.
Right.
So you can get nowhere very quickly. And he thought that 9 was stronger.
Let's hear from Alice, since she's from another town. Did you put up your hand? Oh.
But I will agree with that. I feel like we need to have 9, and that would solve. I was going to go on to another issue. Are we going to take 9?
Well, what I'd like to hear pros and cons.
I think,
Yeah.
I'm one that would think, okay, 9 is good because if you have a tie, it breaks the tie. But if tied with 8, the motion doesn't carry. So it does the same thing. I just want to make sure on page 8 that we're all clear that the 2 school directors are eligible residents from Brattleboro. And then, so there's 2 that have to be from Brattleboro. And then the school directors each would be eligible residents of each of the following communities. So it has to be Dummerston, one from Dummerston, one from Guilford, one from Putney, one from Vernon. The members at large may be from any of the residents.
Right.
And I think the caution that I've heard from the small districts, I think this configuration would only allow 4 total Brattleboro members
I agree.
with 4 other town members. So there would be no, and I don't believe this would happen, but there would be no perception that, well, Brattleboro is running the show. And that's why I think 8 is important. Now, saying that, I work with Brattleboro Union High School, and that is a board that is a very well-functioning board with 5 representatives from Brattleboro and then 1 each from the outlying towns, so a 9-member board. And I never see anything where Brattleboro is dictating what's going to happen to the other board members. So I guess even though that's a well-functioning system, I still like the idea of 8.
Walter?
But to the point of who votes for the Vernon rep, currently on the Brattleboro board, Vernon votes for our representative alone to that board. Why? And I would say in general in select boards in towns, normally each ward or district votes for their own person, and then everyone votes for the at-large. What's the rationale for all of us voting for all
So
of us?
this is actually something we've talked about. We talked about this months ago, Walter.
So I apologize for.
And does everyone remember that
But that was
conversation?
the conversation I was gonna, my question to
Right.
Walter.
No, I
So-
don't
so
remember
this is-
ever getting clear.
Well,
on
well,
that.
so what we understood, so maybe this is a conversation I had with Chris and Donna, but I do think we had it to some degree here. This is a hybrid model, so it's an unusual model. There's a history in the state with this model that has been approved by the Board of Ed. So we can do it with this proportion because it is in a large voting process. The other option would be 5 Brattleboro, the proportional model, right?
So to paraphrase, it's because we have to follow the mandated law of proportional representation.
Yes.
And because everyone is voting on who comes from Brattleboro and everyone is voting on who comes from Vernon, et cetera, then we managed to change our interpretation of that law.
Correct.
Otherwise, it would be 5, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Yes. And this is why I pursued this with Chris, because I thought this would be more receptive to our voters. I have to say, I really do like the 8. Personally, I like the 4. I like the 9 sways what the board looks like.
I think it's funny what Ron said, because I would never have thought of that, you know, the perception that Brattleboro could carry, all of that. I thought when you put it out to at-large that you would almost automatically get somebody else from one of the smaller outlying towns. That was just how my
I think
mind
just
went. I guess there's
in
no
terms of
rationale.
numbers, gross numbers, it's more likely, I think what somebody over here said, it's more likely that the Brattleboro voters would choose Brattleboro at-large members.
If there were all those people that ran. for those.
Yep.
We don't have, in Brattleboro anyway, we don't have a huge amount of people taking out petitions and running for our school board slot. Maybe it's different in other towns.
But there was the question, I think, 2 meetings ago about the petition. If a Vernon person decides to run, can anyone in any of the town be the 20 or 25 or whatever votes?
So
on
if the Vernon resident who was wanting to be the Vernon representative would get 30 signatures from Vernon.
From Vernon.
The at-large members get 60 signatures from any town. And Chris is looking into that language because I questioned whether it needed to be a percentage. So he will follow through on that for us.
And then the actual balloting, we would have it at a town meeting ballot, or the same time as we're voting on anything else that's on a town ballot. So the ballot would look different. I mean, it would be the same little section, but it would fall under everybody's own town ballots. Yes.
I would think.
Yeah.
Kind of like when you go to District 1, 2, or 3 in Brattleboro.
And
The ballot's a little bit different.
I don't know, because I only vote with one ballot.
You can't vote for two other district
I don't
reps.
know, I've never seen everybody else's ballot.
Yeah, but in this case, we can vote for everybody else, so it's,
Right.
which I gotta say, I really don't feel comfortable with at all. I don't, I mean, I'm totally comfortable with the idea of everybody in every town voting for the at-large
At-large.
members, whoever those at-large members are. And I was a needs to be an odd number person, and I get the argument about the 8, and I could live with the 8 before I can live with voting, being responsible for voting for somebody from Guilford, for instance, to sit on this board. As of somebody that doesn't live in Guilford, I don't feel comfortable doing that. And I just like, I wouldn't feel comfortable for somebody from Vernon voting for somebody to represent Brattleboro on this board. You know, the at-large people, I'm good with, you know, but having everybody voting for everybody,
I agree with
it
you.
seems slimy. For
For
lack of a better word, it seems slimy.
It could be, because, you know, if, we'll say people don't like you, Ricky, we're just gonna say,
that's fine.
you know, if everybody else in all the other towns, it could be, you know, a campaign against you.
Yeah.
And it's not a campaign representing the schools, it's a campaign against somebody else. And I think it could lead to
There's
some.
no other option.
I know.
Alice, you said, though, that this was recommended because this has already been passed once before by the department. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't pass something different.
well, so the other options are the ones we've looked at.
But if we put this forward, they wouldn't consider that as an option, potentially?
Such-
Or they already said in other instances where this has come forward, no?
We can, so we would need to ask Chris specifically, and I can do that. I would imagine Chris Leopold, who is our legal counsel on Act 46, I'm pretty confident that he will say that that will not be appropriate, that would not work. But we can certainly do it, and we can certainly take it to the Board of Ed for consideration if we were to end up there.
And I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I
Yeah.
think that if we were to go with the hybrid model, it sort of begs the question of how we define our community. And if we're looking at forming any form of merger, we need to think about how we're defining our children as well as our community. You know, and I think also if the hybrid, you know, ends up being the model that the group goes with, I think it's a great way for the people who are putting themselves on the ballot. It's a great opportunity for them to go around to the area towns, learn more, broaden the perspectives, and present themselves to other voters so that I guess I see it as promoting more dialogue and that greater sense of community. So,
Wait a second, anyone else?
So piggybacking on that, for me, the other reason that we need to just go with whatever is legal, I mean, I think it's fine if we want to ask, we can try to ask. I completely hear what you're saying, it's a good point. But the other option that we looked at was not palatable to the smaller towns. And just last night in Guilford, I found that I had misunderstood the option anyway. So it's 5 Brattleboro, not 3. Somehow I had it in my mind it was 3 and then 4 of the rest of the outlying towns. And that is not an option, right? 3 and 4, because it's not proportional. It has to be 5. So I'm sympathetic to the voice from the outlying towns that we need to be balanced. So if that means that this is the way it has to be, I can live with that, although I certainly hear what Ricky's saying, I hear what Amy's saying. Maybe we could have a discussion with Chris and see what he says and then come back with the final.
Yeah.
I think it's worth that, because I didn't hear it that way, but you had further discussion with
Yeah.
him, so let's discuss that again.
So since we're on this topic and time is tight, one thing he's going to be looking at for us is if we go forward and we have a MUD, so the towns that did not vote for unification would sort of do self-study, right? It's an automatic self-study. So they could join us, the other towns, within the year, or they could just, you know, go off on their own. And chances are good from hearing Rebecca Holcomb that there would be unification of our towns at some point in the near future, but they would have to see that, they would get to see that through on their own. But Chris did say that he would look at the proportions, the numbers, the proportional numbers for a board based on a MUD scenario. So we will also be learning about that, just so you know.
So if one or two other towns decided not to join, what that would look like for those that remain?
Yes, so we could, so there's some considerations there that I do not have answers for you right now. Kim?
And just popped into my head because we're supposed to, when we're supposed to be voting for the board members at the same time that we're voting.
Correct.
So if we're not, yeah, that could be interesting with the numbers.
Yes, and I'm glad he is doing that and not us.
Yes, okay.
But yes, he's on that. So in the calendar, assuming that we're gonna keep considering this, he's worked that into it. Wait, we've heard a lot from Brattleboro, so. Yeah, all right, you're up.
Sorry, a question that came up, I think, last night in Guilford, and I'm still not, I just want to make sure we all hear the same question and all know the answer, because I don't know if I have it clear. So if we send accelerated merger out to all of the towns, how many towns and which towns can say no, that we can still do this MUD?
He's working on that for us. He just wanted to know for sure that we wanted him to get that information.
Well, the section on page 4.
What page?
4. It's right at the bottom of the page. That's the language that he had provided that we saw the last 2 times. So it's the question of whether a district is necessary or advisable. And so this last paragraph, in the event a majority of town districts vote to approve the merger, but 1 or 2 districts vote no. So that's what he's saying. You couldn't do it if you had more than 3 vote no, you wouldn't have the numbers to create.
And can it be Brattleboro with the population difference? Can we vote no and the rest of them?
That would be a MUD with
Yeah, but
an elementary, that'd be an elementary MUD without Brattleboro, right?
Yeah, it would not stand because we wouldn't have planned for that.
Because why?
We wouldn't have planned for that. I believe.
I guess that's a clarification that
Yeah.
because I thought there were, when Beth and I looked at it, I thought there were numbers of students, and I wasn't sure if we'd meet the numbers without Brattleboro.
But that would create then something different than what our document would have already
So I
articulated.
think
So it
it's
would have to be.
back to the drawing board. if
Yeah.
that happens.
Yeah.
We're still on the study committee then. Go ahead, Dan.
I have a clarification, and I apologize if I missed something. So on the bottom of page 4, we're talking about if accelerated, and if it's not accelerated, then it's a MUD. Wasn't there another option that people were talking about? Was it a elementary side by side, or wasn't there something else, or does the MUD incorporate all of the other options that filter to the top of the list after that matrix?
Yeah, I think, well, I can stab at this, but anyone else want to?
Well, I'm just not sure why we're doing that at all. If we're not going to get the advantages of the accelerated option, why would we then limit our options by declaring that we're going to do just one other thing when there's no reason to do that?
I have an answer for that, but does anyone?
And the answer is that because that puts you in the conventional merger, which then gives you the tax benefits.
Right, but we can do the conventional merger anyways. We don't have to rush it if we're not going to get the accelerated.
I guess I would say that I feel like, and I've had my Putney hat on, I've spent hundreds of hours on this process. Literally hundreds and hundreds of hours. And I feel pretty savvy about the law, and I'm pretty confident that Putney's going to be unifying with Brattleboro, and I think probably everyone at this table in 2018. I'm again, my Putney hat on. So I would far prefer to be having a conversation or a Putney rep having a conversation about the education of our kids rather than doing what we're doing right now. I would want my community to get going. So that, again, I just have my Putney hat on. Go ahead, Walter, and then Dan.
Yeah, along those lines, and I apologize, Matt was our representative, he was the person who'd been at all the meetings. At the February 24th meeting, an earlier version of this, if a no happened, that kicked us into taking a year to decide what to do. At what meeting did this group decide, pull that out and put the mud in as our alternative?
I don't remember.
Is it in minutes that are available?
I don't think that this was ever really a decision so much, that's why we're still talking about what's in here, Walter.
But
It's
should
a
we
good
have
question.
been asked before we take this out? and
We
put the
are
mud
being
in?
asked right now, this is why we're having the discussion.
Or why was it
We
previous
have-
before
we have talked
this
about it,
committee
yeah.
was happening?
Well,
It's not like we're
Everything that
doing
goes
things
in here-
against you, Walter.
Oh, no, but I'm saying, but at the February meeting,
Yeah.
once again, I'm just reading an article from the Commons, 12 committee members indicated that the accelerated merger likely wouldn't happen. Only 2 members thought that they should move forward with the so at that meeting, once again, I wasn't there, the consensus of this group, at least, if I go to the minutes, hopefully it will show this, was that we were gonna, this probably wouldn't work, we were gonna take our time. I'm just wondering when that opinion of this whole group, through a straw vote or something else, changed.
Well, my recollection, and everybody should probably speak their recollection of that meeting. And if you look in the Commons article, it's Kim and me, they're the ones that are quoted
Yeah,
the
Yes,
same.
yes.
That's an article.
No, but I'm hoping the minutes will reflect.
I think Amy was
that.
very clear in the minutes writing down that people had their speaking, but I know that when I listened to people trying to make up their mind, there were a lot of things we didn't know. There was a conversation that had happened that we didn't really know about Vernon, and what was going on, and Vernon was just getting that clarification that definitely school choice would be taken away if they merged. And so I remember Beth saying and Mark saying when they were going around, well, if Vernon's not going to be able to do it, then why do we go forward? Do we even want to try to go forward? But those were, we were very clear we were not taking a vote, so people were expressing their opinions. And I think since then, people have kind of expressed other opinions. Maybe Beth wanted.
Well, I think at that meeting, I don't remember us having been presented with the option of being able to move forward with the mud at the same time that we vote down the other. So you're right, when we did the roundtable and we're hearing strong opposition from 2 towns, it was like, well, why are we even pursuing this anymore? And I think that's probably what was reflected in that article. And then between that meeting and the next meeting, I think we got new information that said you can put this type of language in the article that would allow the towns that want to move forward without the towns that don't want to. That's what I remember.
Dan and then Ron.
Just want to bring up another perspective on following up on what Alice mentioned about what is inevitable. Around the state, there's many folks who feel that things will change next year under the new administration. I've had the luxury of meeting with most of the gubernatorial candidates, and I've chatted with them. I've chatted with legislators around the state. I've done a lot of reading, and there's a lot of people out there. It's not a minority that do think things will change, and so there may be, and I put that in quotes, a different interpretation of the act next year.
Ron.
I think, Walter, when we finally got clarification from the Agency of Ed that Vernon would not be able to continue their tuition arrangement, that's what prompted Chris Leopold to say to us, well, so if that's the position that, let's say, Vernon may not choose to do it, you could also go to this option.
And I'll say one more thing and then be quiet on this topic. And Vernon may come out being in a good position in the mud where we've got everyone here and Vernon sitting over here. I'm still not clear on exactly if that's the case or not. I just want to make sure that there was a discussion on, or did this mud language just show up, or was there a discussion, here's an option, do we want to change these articles to reflect that this is the fallback option if there's a no?
I don't remember any discussion putting the mud back in among this quorum. I might have nodded off at hour 2.5 at some point, but I don't recollect any discussion of that.
Go ahead.
that discussion took place on the 24th of
February.
February. And basically, it was a straw poll. And I'm not sure if anybody really took numbers as to whether they wanted the accelerated, the MUD, self-study, but the last word that I had was the majority of this group was not inclined to pursue accelerated on the 24th of February. And subsequently, we have learned more information, and that generated yet another chart, and I guess we have a plethora of charts. And I'm not sure where our discussion is standing on the expanded chart from the 24th of February. But I have not, we have not had a secondary straw poll to see if the positions are now inclined to pursue the accelerator, or if we're still stuck in the, pardon the pun, mud.
Well, I thought we were having that discussion now. So
Well, here
We sort of are.
Well, I just didn't know if I missed something in
Right.
there.
No, yeah,
Can I,
yes,
I'll get you, I do, I was, just so you know, Walter, I was reviewing my emails from Matt earlier today, and he did email me back, I guess it was in February, and he said, by the way, I just want to make sure that you understand that Vernon is not interested in the mud. So he was definitely a participant of that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was being prompted by the camera lady.
Oh, was I?
She mentioned, no, I just wanted to, she
Yeah.
wanted, we could, anybody could see this on, she's
Yeah.
on BCTV, that minute, the meeting.
Ian?
Well, there were two other options that we discussed at that meeting and had discussed before, the MUD and the Union District without Brattleboro. And I don't recall us ever completely dismissing Union District without Brattleboro. That's why I'm not sure why we're automatically going to the MUD, when my understanding was there were two other options on the table if we don't go accelerated.
Yep. So what do we want to, shall we keep working on our agenda, or do we want to take a little time right now to talk about those options, or or do we want to talk about that towards the end of the meeting?
Maybe we need to do another straw poll, is that what you're feeling like, Ian, or? And talk about these options now, is that what you're?
Well, I don't know, is there some reason why that was removed from the discussion?
It was not on the list of I believe it was based on the agenda list that we came up with at the end of that meeting.
No, that was, of the three choices, that was one of the top picks out of that
Yeah.
straw poll.
We can talk about whether we're interested in doing that now.
I think that one actually did come in second in the voting. You had MUD, you had the unified without Brattleboro, and then self-study.
And I don't know if it was at that moment or it was in a subsequent meeting after that, that it became clear or at least it became clear in my head, that a movement into that kind of merger would not satisfy Act 46. There wasn't enough, it doesn't do enough in terms of the savings part if we lose Brattleboro. So that, as someone who in that straw poll said, what would and I read that as, what would you prefer if you could prefer anything? That sounded like a nice option, given our discussion, but the realities of what that would do relative to the law didn't make sense to me going on.
I'm sorry, Richard, which?
Yeah, we were talking about an amendment.
No, I'm asking which, because there's different MUDs that we've talked about.
The elementary, the one that would put the four towns.
So a merging of four
Yes.
towns would not satisfy Act 46, because that is.
Because that doesn't get, that by removing ourselves from Brattleboro, we lose the larger savings of the
But I think
SC.
the push is to the district, so I think there might be some additional push to get the ultimate, I mean, hey, maybe we
Yes.
should merge with New Hampshire, that might save us some money. Because, we could, do that. So, I mean, there may be some additional savings, but I believe Act 46 is very satisfied with us having a merger district with 4 districts. And so there may be additional equity or savings that we could discuss, but I don't think it's a question of being in violation of the law.
I didn't say
or not being
violate,
in
I think what I meant by that, I didn't think in the end it would comply with the law
Okay.
relative to the Department of Justice.
Okay.
And based upon what Rebecca Holcomb said last week, I think she would agree with it.
So I guess I do want to take this moment to recognize that we have 3 Dummerston residents sitting at the table, and honestly, it's a little awkward to be the chair of a committee like this. So I don't know if Christian is in the room, but we need to figure out a way to have that conversation happen at the board, Dummerston board pretty soon.
They tabled that for the next meeting.
Okay.
They're gonna discuss it.
So, to her, to
Yeah.
the point that Richard, I went back to my great chart, and Christina, you studied this even more, I remember when we were talking about it. And what I see under the middle reds variations, which include the muds and reds and side by side and the layered merger, also called Union Elementary, just to confuse things more. So then it says minimum of 1250 or merger of at least 4 districts in order to qualify for tax incentives. So it would, if you did Putney, Vernon, Guilford, and Dummerston, you have the 4 districts. Now, if you did that, you would also have to do school choice.
Yep.
Or not. Vernon has already said no, right, Walter? That you would prefer to keep school choice. So
As an elementary district, so school choice 7 and 8 perhaps.
You have to
Because
be
the high
equitable,
school,
so yeah.
but the
Whatever.
high school's choice would be remain as it is, right? Because that's not.
You have to be the same, my
Yeah,
understanding.
my understanding
it has to be the same for everybody.
Vernon either has
If it's
to,
only an elementary med,
Right. Because your middle school and high school kids have to have all the same thing, so if the
All
four,
the same option.
if all the towns but Brattleboro decided to merge together, and Vernon was one of those, and Vernon was keeping choice, and that, those 4 districts decided to vote to, yes, we're gonna stay together, and my understanding, correct me if I'm
Yes.
wrong, is that if Vernon is gonna keep choice, that means that everybody in all 4 of those towns get choice for everything after 6th grade.
Yes.
From 7th grade through 12th grade, everybody would have choice at that point.
And Vernon would have to be a K through 8, or you guys would all have to be K through 6.
yeah.
So everybody has to be the same on all pieces. So I think that's where Richard says, right? Am I
Yes,
thinking
you're
correctly?
exactly
I
right.
think you said,
You said it.
yeah.
That doesn't fly. And so then the other option that we looked at is all of the elementary schools, right? That was,
Yeah.
Christina, name off the 4 that you guys were looking at.
It's right, yeah.
I'm sorry,
There's Union Elementary with Brattleboro, or Union Elementary without Brattleboro, and
So
then
we just did Union Elementary without, so Union Elementary with Brattleboro.
Right, and that would be
Falls into the same sort of problems.
pre-K to 6.
Pre-K to 6. You guys have 7 and 8 in Dummerston and in Putney. So then you can't do that because it's not light, right? So that eliminates that option. What's the other option?
There was a 2-part one. It was Union pre-K to 12, and that would be with Brattleboro, Guilford, and then maybe Vernon. But, that wouldn't allow Vernon to have a choice. And then Dummerston, Putney, Vernon, and any outside districts would do a pre-K to 8. And that one was very complicated.
So, I just speak for myself, and the rest of Brattleboro can speak for themselves too. But personally, when I look at this and I think about what's good in the supervisory union and trying to keep back, I really liked what Rebecca Holcomb had to say, and it very much resonated with me that we're trying to do this thinking 20 to 30 years in the future. And then it also resonated that we should be doing this for the kids, and that's what we have. I think I came to the table thinking of tax incentives. I said that honestly from the very beginning. But she's right, the more we talk about it, it's not so much about the incentives. Although I will say, I sit and look and say, well, if we're gonna do the same thing in a year, then and I'm giving up 10 cents now, I do look at that. But in essence, to me, if we look at our supervisory union, and already we have a supervisory union that's got 1 high school. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that we were gonna be unifying to rip apart that high school. High school may not be perfect. Probably is not perfect. But I didn't think that we needed to rip it apart. I think we all came into that thought when we came in here, that it was not such an imperfect place at the point of this group was to rip that apart. So then how do we get to something that works under these rules? And to me, the only one that's left is merging with Brattleboro, with all of us together. So that's how I'm there, but I think Walter's point is very valid, that we all might not have had that conversation in our own minds or aloud, and we need to have it aloud right now and make sure that that makes sense.
Walter? Oh, sorry. Were you gonna-
No, I just said thank you. Yeah, no, and I do apologize being at a disadvantage. And
Oh.
what we do here shouldn't have, you know, all right, what can we do and make sure Vernon's happy? I mean, that shouldn't be the role of this committee. And maybe as I've said, maybe the mud is the option that allows us to have our cake and eat it too. I'm just not sure. I just want to make sure everyone is happy with the two choices we have in the current articles. And maybe that is where we started, and if I was quiet, we would have kept going. It's the accelerated and it's the mud, and that's it. And so, I mean, if the group as a whole is happy with those being the two choices, 3 towns have to vote no, to be a full no, which I guess falls back to the third option, which is take more time to figure it out. Unless, you know, once again, I'm not quite sure what the necessary versus advisable school districts and how that affects who votes as yes or no, but I guess that's coming up.
Yeah, so Chris Leopold told us that as you review this with your school boards and you get comment, it may cause you to think that, okay, so you know certain schools are necessary, but other schools may want to be advisory. And it's just kind of language that is part of the statute. So if Vernon, let's say, wanted to maintain their school choice, then we would need to list them as advisable as opposed to necessary.
But what if Dummerston wanted to maintain their town form of government? Can they become advisable and maintain that? I mean, what is advisable?
So the key, can I
Yeah,
respond
go
to that?
ahead.
The key distinction is if a town is labeled necessary and they vote no, the merger, the whole thing is done. So that's the significance of advisable versus necessary. Advisable allows a vote to fail, but those that were necessary and vote yes, or those that were advisable and vote yes, can move forward as a unified system.
So we identify which towns we're calling advisable on the ballot.
Yes.
That's right,
Yep.
in the study committee
And-
report to the
I
state
missed
board.
that one.
And can we say, for example, that Brattleboro would be necessary, all the other 4 towns are advisable, with the understanding that 2 of the advisable would need to be in it in order for that
You could
district?
do that, yeah. That's the maximum flexibility that allows the system to still unify.
So who decides whether Vernon, how is Vernon decided to be necessary or advisable?
What I'm hoping is, as we get these draft articles out to a point where we think we're close, within the next 2 weeks, you bring them back to the board, have discussions about that, and then you're kind of giving us the Vernon perspective on that.
Okay.
And I would like to get these out tonight to the boards, the draft, but we can talk about that. Yeah.
And, you know, the other option too with the question is to go back to the original wording, which is just to consider the one.
Mhm.
You know,
Which, and walk that one through, Amy. So we walk.
Do we do accelerate it? I mean, I'm not, if the committee comes up and says, okay, the accelerated should be presented to the state board and it goes to a town vote, then we just have the one wording, and if one town, you know, says no, then it fails, and at least this is my understanding. And then we start over and we look in more depth at the other options.
Well, we don't start over the study committee.
Yes,
We are
continues.
still
Yeah.
here.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Yeah, Ian, hold on. Richard and then Beth? No? You sure?
Just, Ron, to go back to that question about who gets to determine advisory and necessary, doesn't the document and what this group do, in their work define those terms? Why would a town get to decide that they were necessary?
I think the town weighs in on their feelings. Like, I think about Vernon, that I think
Yeah.
if we were gonna go with this option, I think we'd wanna know that Vernon is advisable as opposed to necessary.
But if Vernon comes back and says, we think we're necessary, and then Vernon votes no.
Right. That's fine.
But why would we?
Because if Vernon's advisable and they vote no, it doesn't hold up the whole process.
That's right, but why have one town determine their necessity when it's really this group that should determine which towns are necessary and which ones are advisable? Because if we all said we were necessary, then one.
No, I think that's why the study committee is responsible for that designation, being informed by the board, but but it's the study committee's responsibility to evaluate the benefit of a union or not.
And we all acknowledge that Vernon is in an unusually difficult situation. I mean, you guys have a very different structure, so that we know that you've got much more conversation and complication, which is why I've also put on the agenda that I do believe we need a Vernon analysis subcommittee, and I've started to work on that, but I think we should all talk about it. So I know the Vernon board is working on this, but I think we need to work on it for the board as well. Go ahead.
Just one other thing, I think Richard's already said it, but if I could reiterate what Rebecca was saying is, State Board of Ed is looking at the intent of the law, and in the absence of an obstacle, like there is in Vernon, in the absence of a legal structure obstacle, the State Board, as she said about 3 times, is expecting a unified system. So the Vernon example, is she even cited it, is that would be a reasonable exception that the State Board would make for an advisable town. But aside from that, we don't have any structural obstacles for a unified system.
Can we move on?
Just one quick,
We're not taking questions now, Deb, I'm sorry. Yeah.
just back to the necessary versus advisable, and I think somebody asked it and you answered, Frank. I mean, the most sense is that Brattleboro is the only necessary district in this unified district.
That's the logical.
But to be unified, there do need to be other districts, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but if everyone else is advisable, then 2 can vote no, and
Yeah.
we move along.
And if I was from Brattleboro, I would almost insist on that. I mean, that everybody else goes advisable, so that we aren't all held up if that's what would happen by one town. If I were from Brattleboro.
But that's part of the whole thinking in a unity type format. Yeah, there we are.
Will there be a vote in the future, an official formal vote of which towns are advisable and which are necessary by this group?
Has to be in the.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
gonna have
the
to be in
report.
this document.
Okay.
But it sounds like what Ron is suggesting is that we would come back to that vote after we finish this language. We can all bring it back to our boards and discuss it.
Exactly.
Yes. Great.
And Brattleboro will take Richard's advisement.
There was another thing that Leopold said about all being advisable, and I just can't remember the drawback. There was a reason why that didn't make sense, but I just can't recall it. So
Go.
we will have to.
Yeah.
Did it have something to do with the size, Brattleboro's size relative to the rest of us?
I don't know.
Would you, could I ask that you guys come write some language, some questions about that for me, Brattleboro, about being advisable, or should I just? I'll just
So like
take
when you
what-
review it with your board, that you're saying, yeah, we would be necessary.
I think we're necessary.
Okay, I just want.
They're on board.
Or necessary.
Okay. We have made that determination. We are necessary. You're right.
I just
Yeah.
want to say that I feel that if we are putting this to the voters, we should be giving them one thing to vote on, not this, nested either or that gives this shadow of inevitability to them and just confuses the whole issue. I think it's a more fair vote, more fair decision process to the voter to just give them one thing to vote on.
And that would be a yea or nay vote, right? Yes or no?
Yes, without, a yes or no to the accelerated option without the.
But what that would do also would, by limiting to just a yea or nay vote, if there's 3 or 4 others that are, that want to pursue this, it would give us the option to move forward and reap the benefits as a unified group at that point in time, which would benefit our children much sooner. And then if you decide to join us, hallelujah, that would be wonderful to have you join us if you want to take the time to pursue the rest. But I feel we need to really give that option so the boards that are the school districts that want to come together can benefit sooner. And those of us that need a little extra help, we will work together as a group and come together quicker.
Yeah, I think, Ian, I shared your opinion last meeting, and between then and now, I've shifted as I've thought about those other options that we've discussed tonight. And after hearing Rebecca Holcomb and thinking, I don't think that that meets the intent. And to Frank's point, unless, and my direct question to Rebecca Holcomb was, the other districts that have gone with something other than this conventional or accelerated model, what were the reasons behind it? And the reasons was there was some structural reason, like we have in Vernon, that prevented them from doing that. It wasn't really, I didn't hear any of the reasons that we're thinking of, meaning that we don't want to change. And so after thinking through those other reasons, it kind of changed my perspective. And then to Alice's point, the idea that we could start working together earlier, I saw benefit in that. So that's what changed my mind.
Jill?
And I also see it as one vote. It's a vote. It's a little bit more language, but it's still a vote, merging or not merging. So to me, it's not that much of a complicated vote. You're either going to merge, and we're going to merge with everybody that says yes on this day when they're all voting, or we're not merging because not enough people merge. I mean, or you're against the merge. But that's it. And to me, it's not a complicated vote.
Can we move on? School closure is the next on the agenda. Do we need to talk about this language again? I just wanted to touch base on it. I feel like at the last meeting, we covered it pretty, yeah.
In light of the mud concept, how does that play out with the majority required to close the school then?
Still
Supermajority,
the
so
two,
like,
3/4.
it depends on.
Yeah.
So if it's 3 districts, it would be.
7 out of 8, right?
And
No.
depending on the representation, I just think it's what is that supermajority if we only have 7 reps at the table? I
Yeah,
guess
so
we'll
still
actually,
have- yeah.
so actually you'd still have 8. So as an example, if Vernon chose to be out,
Okay.
under page 8, if you look at the bold print under board representation, for non-member districts, so let's, as an example, Vernon, will have the voting power of all general union district actions, including secondary students, because their students would still, some of them would still be going to high school, but will recuse themselves from votes, and I would add, in discussions on elementary school issues. But they still have a vote. We still have a representative from those towns that choose.
Elementary closure.
Because it's not going to be about the Vernon closure. There'd be discussion about another town, so that they wouldn't, there'd be no reason for a Vernon rep to have any input on that.
And the supervisory district would have no decision on what Vernon would do with their elementary school.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah.
What did you say?
So I thought that protected, those numbers protected all of the member districts.
Because it's a mud, Vernon is separate, so the unified school board could not vote, has no control over Vernon's elementary school. Vernon.
So that's an example of Huntington right now in Chittenden East, where they chose to go alone. They still are part of the union unified board, but they don't decide on elementary issues.
Dan?
Again, I apologize if it's something that you guys already talked about. What was the reason for going majority or supermajority versus unanimous? I heard Rebecca say that you absolutely could make it unanimous on last Thursday night, so I was just curious if anybody had any thoughts about why not make it unanimous.
Well, we were at 2/3 at the start, or simple majority.
No, we're at 2/3.
Okay, 2/3, and then we thought, okay, to really strengthen this more, we would go to supermajority.
It's essentially protecting the small districts from.
But why not make it, I guess, was there any discussion about making it unanimous? That way everybody, you get the buy-in of everybody rather than just being outvoted.
Well, I do remember we did have, during one of those discussions, we did mention something along the lines of, for instance, let's use Vernon just as an example. If Vernon was in completely and decided, and they only had 10 students in their school and were insisting on keeping the school open, then, and everybody else was in agreement that, no, we need to close the school, it doesn't make sense to run a building with 10 students in it, for instance, then that would mean if we had to have a majority, if we had to have a unanimous vote, Vernon would always vote no. And then we would never be able to close that school, and then next year we have 9 students in that school, or whatever it is, and it becomes a point where it doesn't make academic sense, doesn't make educational sense, doesn't make fiscal sense to keep a school open. So that's, I think, why we went with the supermajority as opposed to unanimous, just because if it was in a particular town where it was one school, it could mean that you could have 10 students in a school and the school would have to stay open. Which I think we all kind of agree that that would not make sense to end for anybody, especially for the kids in that school. Does that make sense, Dan?
It does. Juxtapose that with some earlier discussions about how that would never happen because people would come to the decision on their
Well,
own.
we don't think we don't think it would ever happen, but
it's a safety.
But it's a safety net in case it could.
Yeah.
Anything else on school closure? Okay. Educational, advisable districts and articles of agreement and warning article language. So we did cover it, but I just I'll say again that Chris Leopold is working on specifics for us, and that there's a schedule to that. Educational benefits review, do we want to talk about that at the same time as we talk about the public information campaign?
What number are you on here?
No, I'm on the agenda, not in the report.
Oh, no wonder we're left.
Yeah.
Bullet 5.
Okay. What?
Bullet 5.
Bullet 5? Okay. All right, so, yeah.
I just think one of our big problems in this whole process has been the fact that educational benefits review appeared in bullet 5, not bullet 1. That's kind of been the way we've approached this whole thing.
Is what?
Well, these documents were developed early on in our process. This one from February 3rd, but that was updated February 3rd, and this one was more recently updated. But these are the things that we've been reviewing. I've got extra copies if you like.
Yeah, it's safe to say we've as a group spent a whole lot more time talking about the money than about the educational benefits. And that's why I think this has been so messy and so contentious, because we're not clear on why we're doing this in the first place if we're not focusing on the educational benefits as a group.
I disagree, but I mean, that's fine, and everybody's willing to have their own opinion. We spent a little bit of time, Ron went through basically all of one meeting on the tax incentives and the sorry, Ron, Frank went through all of that, but I mean, to me, I remember the very first conversations we had about this. I kept talking about foreign language, and everybody kept telling me to shush after a while, right? You guys all remember me going on and on about foreign language and program equity, and we've talked so much about the behavioral. Yeah, she's kicking me over here.
And the vast majority of us have researched with our principals, and we spend a lot of time dredging that up.
And I think we've spent a whole lot more time talking about school closure than we've talked about
which I think
money
is
part.
particularly germane, and governance. I think school culture and school closure and town governance have been our biggest sticking points, and that I think we acknowledged quite quickly on that there were inequities in education, and we wanted to realign that.
Can we leap into public information campaign and then come back to Vernon analysis? So we talked at length at the very beginning about the need to, create a really vibrant website, an interesting website for folks to go to, and we still haven't done that. Or information, we just need to get information out. And now that it sounds like we are leaning towards putting this in front of the voters, giving them the consideration, we need to do that. We need to educate folks and let them know what we have been studying. So how do we want to do that?
Jill sent me an email, and I thought she hit all the nails on the head.
Right. This is the one I sent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we now have a list of information that we think that was created. I sent an email to Amy and Jill asking them if they could come up with a list of information that should be shared with folks.
Yeah.
Do you want to quickly go over that? Very quickly?
It'll take me a second to find it if you want to come back.
So do we want to do a link off the WSESU website with a...
You do now with Act 46,
Right.
a link, so then you can just add to that.
Yeah. Is that,
That's right. Right now, it goes to the notice of board meetings, which gives us the meetings and the agendas. And there are a couple of links to the matrix and to the VCTV site. That's it.
We definitely need to expand upon it, it's
Yeah.
just been hard to keep up.
yeah.
Yeah,
We're
so,
moving
I mean,
fast.
I think once we get our, start pulling the information together in a cohesive format, then, you know, we should start putting it on there and it would be, you know, readily available to everybody. But, you know, up until this point, there's been so much movement and.
Yeah.
It would
It's
be
hard.
helpful to have whatever draft we're working on this document.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So rather than asking Jill to go down the list, do we want to just ask Jill to collect all the, why don't we email her suggestions of what could go on? Does that work for everyone?
And to be clear, my list was easily come upon in my head because I just had to present at the town information night. And Beth presented last night too, so definitely send me your thoughts on that. But it was basically a layout of why we're doing it, why the law exists, and we don't know
I
why.
have it here.
Okay.
Oh, you got it, you're
Yeah.
fast.
So the first thing was explain what the law is, what it requires, and it would be Alice's primer, the timeline for the study committee if we go accelerated, and clearly marked as if we go accelerated, you know, so qualifying that. The second thing was to show what we found as inequities when we've been doing our self-study and analysis, the program overview that we did, the SBAC scores from last year, the NECAP scores from previous years, and maybe we can throw in some Ames Web stuff too. I don't know how difficult that would be to pull.
So we could just put this document on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
was working on Ames Web scores from all the schools in the district.
and then number 3 was current situation, showing details of the enrollment decline, the SU as a whole, district enrollment, with the source being from the AOE census data. And then the K-6, WSESU's K-6 or 8 district enrollment census data. The actual percentage of declines calculated, average class sizes for each, current expenditures per pupil over time, WSESU consolidated financial statement expenditures FY16 budget. I think that's Frank's proposed, what it might look like. And then number 4 was opportunities within a consolidated system, current staffing assumptions compared to unified system analysis, list program opportunities that we've done before, and we need to update that. And 5 was possible options for consolidation. Chart of the different options allowed that Jill originally created, and then the chart of the different options that we could consider how they break down for us, and that's the one that Christina, myself, and Alice worked on. It was the matrix that compared the concerns that we all had. And then a document that's not created yet showing potential savings by allowing movement between schools, balancing class sizes, and decreasing staff. And then the final one was the merger documentation, reviewing the articles of agreement, and any school closure language. So I thought that was really quite comprehensive.
Well,
Nice job.
and my thought on that would, it would be all on the website.
Yes.
It would not be something that we want people to walk through in a meeting, because they,
Right.
how can you take all that in? But then if anybody wanted to go look at it, it's a lot of it is what we've been talking about and looking at ourselves, so that people would be able to walk through that same mental process and see why.
So are we okay suggesting, encouraging Jill to take this project on?
What's my deadline? It would be.
It's pretty soon. We can talk about the deadline.
Would Beth like to help?
Beth did a great presentation the other night.
Oh, look at that face. She says yes.
Well, I just wonder if the link, put her presentation as a link.
Yeah.
To,
Yeah, so this isn't a lot, so it's just, that would be a part of the sort of packet, and then the packet just gets delivered to Ron, who gives it to his guy. So it's not a lot of
Most of
work.
it's already created.
Right. Does that work, everyone?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So do we need to address anything else? We're going to talk about forums in a moment, but anything else for public information?
Well, I was wondering about when we do the actual public forums, we're gonna have one, this is website documentation we were just talking about, but
Yeah.
we would do one presentation. Like Beth had to come up with one on her own for last night, and I came up with one on my own for the Brattleboro folks. But I was hoping that we would all have exactly the same information.
I don't know though, because I think each town is gonna have their own thing that they.
Well, so if we present the same stuff and then you go off
And then
onto
you
the
go off.
town specific.
Yeah.
Knowing that you both saw Beth's PowerPoint, at least some of us, we could use that as a template possibly, and then work from that.
I mean, to be honest, my presentation was just a copy. I mean, I just made summaries of the articles. It wasn't like any great.
No, but it was good.
Can you,
It was
can,
clear.
yeah,
That's great.
can you send us that as an attachment?
I sent it to Lyle, but I
I
think
have it.
you have it too.
Yeah. Okay,
There were a couple things that have to be edited.
Tweaked, yeah.
Yeah.
great. So can we look at the time? So a few things are in the report that I think I highlighted as were new. So we could spend time talking about them, but let me just quickly address them and then you guys can tell me. So school attendance and educational, I don't know how we would phrase this, but school attendance boundaries, page 9. Nowhere in the report do we say that, say, if someone lives on the outskirts of Putney, closer to Dummerston, that they could go to the Dummerston school rather than driving to Putney Central School. We don't say that, and this is something we've been talking about a lot. So, yeah.
So, well, this current statute that allows for elementary school choice within a district.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned that a while back, that, you know, in some cases, you put like a cap of 3 to 5% on leaving or entering students. So, you know, we could look at that.
Yeah, I've read it in other reports, that this language is in there, and so that within the first year or two, the larger board would give consideration to that. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
What does it matter if it's one budget? I don't understand. What's the,
Because they're different residents.
You just don't wanna have,
but putting a cap on it, I don't understand. It's all one budget. I don't get it.
Right, so this would not, you're asking Ron, or you're
Yeah.
asking?
Yeah, so it's protection against closing schools, where you might have.
So it's not the financial end? It's
No, no.
the student count
It's
is.
Yeah.
student count, but viability.
So then 5 years later, it looks different because 50 kids
Mass
move from one school to another school.
yeah, and then you'd end up having to close.
And when I read this, it also reminded me of something that Guilford has been facing recently, where we had quite a few students move to a neighboring town, and I would think this would address it, where all of those students wished to stay in Guilford, but they couldn't. And under this merger situation and this particular article, they'd have that option of staying in Guilford even though they were residing in a different town.
So, okay to keep moving on this article?
Well, so is it written in here then?
It's not written in here. I talked to Chris Leopold about it today, and I also forwarded Lyle an email asking her to come up with some language for us, because she's spoken very eloquently about this before. So, and it only takes a couple words, so if that's okay, I'm gonna keep, does that work? Yeah, okay. So the other thing in here is community use of schools and community use of school property. I heard that, I think at one of the school meetings I've attended. Obviously, it's a concern. People wanna go into their school and use it the way they've always used it. Obviously, this board has every intention of, you know, this committee has every intention of retaining that. Chris suggested that I go to the Essex School Report to find language that would work in our favor. So I thought I would just put that in here, if that's all right, and then we can tweak it or keep it, or works. Okay, so at the very end of the report you're looking at is language about the modification, which we've talked about all night. This is just the beginning of a draft. This is very legal language that Chris does need to work on for us, and it sounds like we can go ahead and ask him to do that.
So which article is this?
So this is
Article
at
15?
the very end,
16.
15 and 16.
Okay.
Okay. He did suggest that we add to the appendix school property data, that the Board of Ed would be wanting that data by the end of the report submission
About the
process.
Putney Forest.
Well, funny, he actually suggested that the Putney School Board get a lawyer to deal with that. So we're gonna do that, and I'll talk to you about that. But I actually might send an email to all school board chairs to get folks thinking about that. I don't think there are gonna be many situations. I know you guys have a solar issue, and I don't know whether that's a concern, but we can have Chris write language in that, that it's not a part of the property, and then July 1, 2017, the board would make a decision to whether it goes to the new district or does, proceed however the board wants it to proceed. So that's something I'm working on, okay? So I would like consensus, I would like to talk about the calendar, the schedule I've worked up with Chris and Ron at Touch. I'd like to get consensus that this is something we want to let the board see, because I think the more that we hear from them, the more we can, we can determine whether this is something that we actually all want to have folks consider. I don't think we're all fully there yet. I think there's lots of questions still floating around. Clearly, some of us know what we're interested in having happen. Others are not convinced, not sure. So I think the sooner boards get this and start providing feedback to you and others, it would be good. Chris advised that if we do distribute it to sort of like pass it off for consideration to our boards, that it's very clear that it's a working draft, okay? And what I would want to do is take this back home tonight and work till 2 or something, and put in the language that we've been talking about, put in the Essex language, and then get it out to you guys tomorrow, or you could tell me just to send it to your boards. Barb could send it out. Just, you should tell me how you want to distribute it. And then there's a Vernon Forum next week. We would get draft language from Chris Leopold about the articles and the petitions, right? So the petitions for the board positions within the next week or two. Then Ron and I would meet pretty quickly with the town clerks, with Barb, because Chris said that it can be complicated. There's a whole new realm for the town clerks. So we would need to talk to them and get their feedback about how they want us to handle it, and talk to them about what the best end date vote is. Again, this is so that we have things in place. This is not because we've committed. We just need to put the groundwork in place for considerations. So that's how that would happen. Chris is suggesting the very last week of June for a vote because of his respect for the clerk process. He knows it's going to be time consuming for them. It doesn't have to be that late, but he said out of respect for them, we should push it off as late as we can. He suggested that most clerks have votes on Tuesdays, so I just chose June 28th. So we would then, in the very start of April, just to go back up, we would, yeah.
That's Guilford, not Dummerston.
Okay.
April
Okay.
5th should be a study committee work session at Guilford.
And so again, guys, this is a draft. I will work on it once you guys tell me what you think. Then the draft on April 12th, Donna Russo-Savage really wants a pretty good draft. She would just start looking at it more seriously, looking at legal languages, come up with questions the Board of Ed would have for us, so we could answer those ahead of time. So we would still be working on it, however. So she would be working on it, school boards would be looking at it, and also about that date, we want to let folks know that we are seriously considering. We're still studying, but this very well might be up for their consideration. But he felt it was important to let folks know primarily so that folks really pay attention and start coming to meetings and asking questions and learning about our process. But also the folks who might run for these positions need to start preparing themselves. Then we have a couple of school board study committee meetings. Final draft goes to AOE, goes to Donna Russo Savage on May 3rd. We would post the vote on May 6th. Draft is distributed to the board of Ed at that time too. Then we meet with them on May 17th, and I don't remember where the meeting is, and we don't all need to be there, but I would, if we were to do this, it would be a good idea in case they wanted to change something, or we suddenly learned that, you know, something about Vernon, or, you know, important for us all to be there, because changes can be made right there at the table with them. And then we go, again, if we're still on pace of consideration, we think we're busy now, but then we are extremely busy as a study committee from May 18th until the vote, because we are having forums. So, anything glaring that I have forgotten about? Yep. So, all right. So, is it okay for us to pass this off? What do you guys think? Are you comfortable sharing this with the boards?
Or just have Barb get it out to all the members.
Yep. So what I will do is I will work on it tonight, and then, go ahead.
Well, we mumbled, last night I think it came up in Guilford about term limits.
Mm-hmm.
We
I
didn't
think
put
that's
that in
great.
the article.
You want to speak to that?
Guilford asked a question if people could be on the, what's the term you want me to use, Ron? Unified board?
Yes.
There we are. If we could be, and he doesn't like my super board. So, the unified board, if that would have any term limits, people asked in Guilford, and there were a lot of people thinking that's probably not a bad idea, so that you're not on a school board position for life. I don't think any of our boards have that now, but.
Yeah, we're gonna check into it. We don't think it's legal, but we'll look at it.
So I will, Chris. Okay.
And compensation, I don't think we've ever talked about either.
I think we did at one
Yeah,
point at the very
there was a
beginning.
document when you looked at all the
Yeah.
options, where you had the spreadsheet where you had current stipends and proposed. So that was early on.
Yeah.
So we
I
could put
remember
that on
talking
the
about it.
website. Who created that? Barb, did Barb create that? Okay.
It was a subcommittee, one of your first subcommittees that
Oh,
worked on
yeah. All right.
board representation.
In the article.
No.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Well, yeah, it's 24. Yeah. Which is it's a savings, because I think it was close to 30, or it is 30 or something and going up.
So it's gonna be 9, to be 8.
We can, right, because of,
As I recall, like a $20,000 savings, something like that.
It was 24,000 for 9 board members is what's in here.
Oh.
So now we're at 8 board members.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So they need to update that section.
okay, so I will put some updates in here which you will not have looked at. How do you want me to handle that?
Well, I think that if we're all gonna, if all our boards are gonna be looking at the same draft, I mean, we can chime in, they can chime in, you know, I think, thank you,
Yeah.
first of all, do what you're gonna do, get it to Barb can get it out to all the board members in all 5 towns, for all 6 boards, and then everybody can chime in on their piece, and if it's a part that one of us haven't seen, because we just, you know, the Essex language, for
Yeah.
instance, or whatever, that none of us have, we really haven't seen or don't know in front of us, that's okay. At our next meeting, we can talk about that.
Maybe I'll put it in a different font.
I was gonna say
Is that
star
right?
it, font it, whatever.
Okay.
You do.
Yeah,
The
well,
whole
yeah.
thing's a work in progress, so it
Yep.
Yeah.
doesn't really.
Well, but
see it specifically.
but people do care. I mean, when things sort of appear in the report, it makes people concerned about why they're
Why it's
appearing
there.
without consideration, full consideration. Okay, is there anything we haven't thought of that we need to, guys, we're late.
Do we want to
Sorry.
put locations on this to get it
Yes.
on people's calendars?
Do I have all the dates right in here?
And these dates aren't all dates for meetings, so can we go through and
Right, so they will be, I think. Oh, no, right, correct.
Don't do that.
So,
The 28th, we have it at, that's the Vernon Forum.
yeah, and then,
April 5th is at Guilford,
Yes.
and we have April 13th at Oak Grove, and that's all.
Oh, hold on a quick second. April 6th, is there still a Brat forum at 6 o'clock, Jill?
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
It's a school, yeah, it's a school board meeting followed by a
A
Act
forum.
46 forum.
At what school?
Academy.
At Academy.
So we don't meet again as a group till April 5th.
Right.
right. And that might very well be on, no, April 5th. So the March 28th meeting was switched to a Vernon forum. So, right, so that actually might need to be a 2.5-hour meeting on the 5th.
So the 28th is a Vernon forum, not a study
Correct.
committee meeting.
Correct.
Was it originally a study committee meeting?
Yeah.
That's what I had
Yeah.
on my calendar.
So
who
March
who
28th
switched
gone?
it to a forum?
I think
We did?
you guys did.
We did.
I wasn't
Michael did.
consulted.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, but-
Michael did, that was our forum, and I don't think he was aware that this committee was also meeting in Vernon at the same time.
Okay. Same.
So, I'm sorry, I'm lost. March 28th now is off the calendar.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you are invited.
Jill's tooth thanks you.
So let's go one more time, guys, because I know everyone wants to leave.
So the next one is April 13th at Oak Grove.
No,
No, no, no.
April
No, no.
5th.
Oh,
Fifth
no, we
at
don't have that.
Oh, no,
Guilford.
let's
April
burn
5th at
this,
Guilford.
baby. April 5th,
Yep,
Yeah,
at Guilford.
April 13th,
yeah, Oak
April
Grove.
27th.
We don't have a location for that.
Say the week of the Wednesday.
Putney,
Or Vernon, because we haven't had Vernon.
Vernon's got the 28th.
Forum,
BUHS has not
Let's do
hosted.
Vernon.
Vernon's be-
BUHS,
Okay.
BUHS.
For what day?
It's April
April
27th.
27th.
Ah.
And this will be on the website too, and that's, we'll make sure. May 3rd, location. Let's do Brattleboro again.
This is May 3rd.
Yeah.
Need to see May
Which
3rd.
VSB?
No chance of that being May 4th, huh?
Helpful for one was. So.
What?
May 4th is a school board meeting forum for us at preschool that we talked about last night with Guilford, if they wanted to come to that.
So May 3rd, give me a location.
BUHS?
Again, that's 2 in a row, BHS.
That's fine.
You wanna-
Vernon?
Vernon? Vernon on the 3rd.
Okay, and then I think it might be Essex on the 17th, but I will find out. All right, are we good?
Until the next change, yeah.
It will never change.
So for our next
Yeah.
series of meetings, we just plan 2.5 hours at each of them?
I think we probably should tell a decision's made. Guys, could you please forward me any questions you might have for Chris Leopold or for me to pursue over the next couple days, so I can get that done and back to you? All right? Thank you, everyone. I'm so sorry, and thank you to Dummerston for chipping away at the process. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor? Any opposed? What?